So following our discussion of command and control regulation, we're now going to look at an alternative set of policy approaches known as market-oriented environmental tools. So these tools represent a different philosophy, a more economic philosophy, if you will, in tackling pollution, one that emphasizes creating incentives for firms to reduce pollution in a flexible and cost-effective manner. Unlike the direct mandates of a command and control approach, market-oriented policies aim to harness the power of markets to achieve environmental goals. They want to make it more of an incentive structure. So the three main tools that we're going to focus on are things like pollution charges, marketable permits, and better defined property rights. These approaches are really important to addressing some of the limitations that we saw with command and control regulations. So at the end of this section, you should be able to show how pollution charges impact a firm's decisions, suggest other laws and regulations that could fall under pollution charges, explain the significance of marketable permits and property rights, and then evaluate which policies might be most appropriate for various situations. So market-oriented environmental policies are designed to create these incentives for firms to reduce pollution in ways that offer flexibility and cost effectiveness. Primary tools are pollution charges, which are essentially taxes on the amount of pollution that a firm emits, and marketable permits, which can establish basically a cap on total pollution, but also allow firms to trade their permits to pollute. And lastly, better defined property rights, which can clarify the responsibility and encourage sustainable resource management. These tools are intentionally structured to overcome some of the drawbacks that are associated with command and control regulation, like the lack of incentives for exceeding the minimum standards and the inflexibility of mandated technologies. The first market-oriented tool we'll examine is the pollution charge. A pollution charge is essentially a tax that is imposed on the quantity of pollution that a firm emits. This type of charge provides a profit-maximizing firm with a direct financial incentive to determine and to adopt the least expensive technologies for reducing its pollution. Firms will reduce emissions as long as the marginal cost of reducing the pollution is less than what the tax would be. This encourages the adoption of more cost-effective pollution reduction technologies because it directly gives them a financial reward for lowering their emissions. It reduces their tax burden. All right, so let's visualize how a pollution charge works. Imagine a scenario where a pollution charge is set at $1,000 per unit of pollution. That is the tax. And you can see here it is a flat line because it is just a flat $1,000 per unit produced. Okay. Now, in this case, a firm is going to have a strong incentive to reduce its pollution here by 30 pounds. This, as you can see, is the marginal cost of reducing the particle emissions. And so up until about 10, 20, 30 pounds, that cost is increasing and the marginal cost of reducing those are increasing. And so I'd either have to pay $1,000 per unit, or I could not pay that and reduce my pollution, and it costs me less to reduce my pollution up to the 30 pounds mark. The first 10 pounds, I'm going to make a lot of profit on this. I'm going to save a lot of money. The next 10 pounds up to 20, I'm still making quite a substantial amount of profit. But even up to 30, I'm better off reducing pollution. It's going to cost me less, marginally, it's going to cost me less to reduce 30 pounds of pollution than it would for me to pay the tax. Now, if I'm up here in the 40 and 50 world, I'm going to pollute because, it's the marginal cost of reducing pollutions at this scale is just too high. It's going to cost me too much. I'm going to rather pay the pollution charge. But if I can reduce the first 30 pounds here, that's going to be a tax savings for me. I won't have to pay the pollution charge. I will have to pay the cost of mitigation, but that cost of mitigation, the marginal cost, is less than the pollution charge. Okay, so that's the idea here. That's what the pollution charges would do for us. The second key market-oriented tool is the concept of marketable permits, which is often referred to as a cap-and-trade system. So under this system, the government issues permits for a limited total amount of pollution. A crucial aspect of this approach is that the total allowable pollution is capped. and it's often reduced over time, which leads to an overall decrease in pollution. But these permits can be bought and sold amongst firms, so it gives a lot of flexibility into the marketplace. Firms that can reduce their pollution more easily and at a lower marginal cost can do so and then sell their remaining permits to other firms for whom pollution reduction is more expensive. So it adds a lot of flexibility into the marketplace. You're giving them something of value, an asset, a tradable document that says if one company needs to pollute more because of their cost structure, they can buy permits from other businesses who have a cheaper way of eliminating that pollution. That's what Tesla makes a lot of money doing. They get these cap and trade permits, but then they end up selling substantial amounts of them because they're very good at reducing their emissions. So a classic example of a successful application of marketable permits is in reducing lead emissions. Firms with lower abatement costs found it profitable to reduce their lead emissions significantly and then sell their excess permits to firms who faced higher reduction costs. This resulted in the overall target for lead reduction being met in a cost-effective way. Similarly, the 1990 Clean Air Act amendments utilized a cap-and-trade system for sulfur dioxide emissions to combat acid rain. And this is widely considered a massively successful application of the market-oriented tool. The ability for firms to buy and sell those permits ensured that pollution reduction happens where it is the cheapest to achieve it, and it leads to overall cost savings for society while still meeting environmental targets. But when it's a success, in 1990, the Clean Air Act was a massive success. We have eliminated acid rain because of this act. We have eliminated it. And that is something that is mind-boggling to me. I mean, I was born in '89, so I grew up in elementary school. We learned about acid rain, and it's gone. We don't have it anymore because we don't emit sulfur dioxide like we did in up until this point. So it can be very successful. Now, the third market-oriented tool involves better defined property rights. Property rights refer to the legal rights of ownership that prevent firms from infringing on a resource without paying compensation. When property rights are clearly defined and enforced, it can lead to more efficient resource use and pollution control. The Coase theorem suggests that even in the presence of externalities, an efficient outcome can be reached through bargaining if property rights are well defined and the transaction costs are low. For example, consider a farmer whose field is near a railroad track. If the railroad's sparks cause fires on the farmer's land, then clearly defining who is responsible can lead to a resolution, whether it's the farmer taking precautions or the railroad investing in spark reduction. So issues involving things like endangered species on privately owned land, those can also be addressed through clearly defined property rights. It incentivizes landowners to maintain their habitats rather than destroying them. That's where this has really come up a lot, is with endangered species. When we compare market-oriented policies to command and control regulation, we see a lot of potential advantages. Market-oriented policies offer flexibility for firms to innovate and to reduce their costs in their own way. They can also achieve the desired pollution reduction at a lower overall societal cost because reductions happen where they are cheapest. Furthermore, they avoid some of the political loopholes that can arise in command and control regulation due to lobbying. However, there are also limitations. The effectiveness of pollution charges depends on setting the appropriate tax level, and the success of marketable permits relies on determining the right quantity of permits and the amount of pollution that you'll allow. Additionally, not all market-oriented tools are suitable for every environmental situation. So in practice, the application of these market-oriented policies often involves careful consideration of specific context. For instance, pollution charges might be particularly effective for widespread low-emission sources like car engines or soda cans, where monitoring individual emissions is difficult, but a general tax can create some broad incentives. Marketable permits tend to work best in industries with a smaller number of participants. Think oligopolies and even monopolies like utilities or refineries, coal-powered plants, where tracking and trading permits is a little bit more manageable. We see this in the automobile industry as well. It's also important to note that a combination of tools is also able to be effective. For example, you could do marketable permits and pollution taxes for emissions that are not covered by the permit system. Or you could integrate property rights management into the permitting systems, and that can help enforce the enhanced resource management. Ultimately, the choice and design of these market-oriented environmental tools, it needs to be tailored to the specific environmental problem and the characteristics of the polluting sources. So that's where this video is going to end. In the next video, we're going to talk about the benefits and the costs of United States environmental laws. After that, we'll talk about international environmental issues. I'll see y'all in that one.